How are you guys?
I'm all right, Fred. How are you?
Yeah, it's great to see you in person
Yeah,
as well as Abhinav.
Great to see you as well.
yeah. It's a
And
very
nice,
nice Saturday.
nice coffee.
Yeah,
Let's go.
it's coffee chat.
So finally, we have coffee with the coffee chat.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
for sure.
wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, it's nice to be in person doing this, and yeah, we hope to do this more often.
Yeah,
All right. So, welcome everyone to episode 3 of our EPM Coffee Chat podcast. Today, we have an interesting person on our podcast, so we'll introduce him. And the agenda for today is we're going to talk about the August updates. Then we will talk about Abhinav a little bit. We will get into EDM because that's his forte, one of his fortes. So we'll talk about EDM and latest updates from EDM in the last, I don't know, 6, 7 months, or maybe in 2024. And then we talk about the upcoming events in EPM and Oracle in general. We don't have Harsh and Asma today. So once they're back, we'll also do a KScope update video. All right, maybe we start with introducing Abhinav. So welcome, Abhinav. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Abhinav Anand. I've been working in the EPM space for the last 5 to 6 years, mostly ranging across the EPM suite of products. So worked on EDM a lot, Account Rec, one of our favorite products within EPM. Obviously worked on planning and narrative reporting as well. So pretty much focused on working across the EPM suite. We have been working with Arun over the past couple of years as well. So, we share a lot of information, we share a lot of knowledge around EPM. So what better forum to share that and share some important or some interesting topics based on our experience in the past. So very happy to be here. Nice to meet you as well, Fred, in person.
yeah,
Learned a lot about
likewise.
you too. So very happy to be here.
Thank you, Abhinav. So just so everyone knows, Abhinav has a YouTube channel. I've put the link in the deck. So he's been putting out videos on EDM specifically. So do watch his videos. I think I've started learning a little bit more about EDM watching his videos. And then I've put his LinkedIn link as well, so you can connect with him. Okay, so we can get into the August updates maybe. Fred, I'm gonna pass it on to you. What I'll do is I'll also share my screen once it's done talking about each of these, and we can maybe show the Oracle documentation and talk a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we can start with the air gapped backups in the secondary region. So this is something that Oracle is going to release in August. What it means is that just in case of power outage or any kind of disaster, the backups of customers will be stored in the secondary on the secondary database, which gives more assurance that customers, LCMs or snapshots will be securely saved, and that means that customers shouldn't or can skipping saving their LCMs on their servers, because Oracle anyway will keep it for 60 days.
Yeah.
Unless you need to have any particular LCM, or if you need to keep it for more than 60 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a nice feature. I think in the last update, we got the upgrade to 60 days of
Right.
snapshot backups. That's good too. So I think this makes a lot of sense.
I
Yeah.
think there were instances in the past where I've got specific questions while on projects where they've been asking me, oh, what happens if there's a disaster?
Yeah.
What happens if there's a power outage? And I think it's great that they thought about it and introduced something which will be, I think, very, very important in terms of giving more assurance to users that systems will be available. They'll have backups that they can go back to.
Yeah, I agree.
Still remember the early days when we had to write EPM automate scripts and
Yeah.
daily backups and
The Oracle, I think they used to store some of the LCMs randomly. I don't know how they choose them, but
I think the introduction of 30 days snapshot backup was very good.
yeah,
Now they have increased this to 60 days, which is even better.
right.
And I think I'm sure there's more improvements and stuff in this area in the future. So.
And it's 60 days for both prod and test, if I recall correct.
Yes.
Yeah, job scheduling in data management and data integration, this is a great addition to EPM platform. Now you don't need to create pipeline. If you want just to run one integration as a standalone, you can run it you can just schedule it from the job card, which is really great and adds a lot of flexibility. And all other features like that you had in data manage, or if you had to schedule them from data manage, they are now available from the jobs card as well, which is I personally like it much more. It's more user friendly. It's easier to set up, easier to control, even for just a regular user or administrator.
Yeah.
So really
I think I've really struggled with Batch before. To be very honest here. So this is a really welcome change that a lot of the scheduling is being moved to the job console, because I feel it's more user friendly.
Yeah.
It's more interactive in the sense that you can edit stuff later on after you've actually scheduled the job. I think this was one thing that I struggled with about 4 years back. When you schedule something in batch, you actually cannot go and edit it.
Yeah.
You have to actually cancel and reschedule. So this is one thing I remember very specifically facing issues with. So job scheduler, I think, is much more interactive in that sense.
Yeah. I think just before this podcast, I was talking about metadata integration. So, you obviously have EDM, which can perform a lot of integrations on metadata synchronization between different systems. But let's say if you don't have EDM and you do have the out-of-the-box connections for metadata integration with GL. So you could, in theory, schedule a job, an integration, which brings in your metadata every day for that matter.
Right.
So that's a very good example of how you can use the new capability.
Right. Yeah. Right. Overall, I think why you would have scheduling something in different places in applications, right? It makes sense just to have it in one place. You have more consistent application, easier to know where to go whenever you would like to schedule something.
Yeah, and with pipeline, I think now that you have pipeline and you can actually club multiple jobs into a pipeline, and you can schedule a pipeline itself, makes it a little more easier in that sense that all your jobs get scheduled from the job scheduler itself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all these are welcome improvements. And you see a lot of thought has gone into including these kind of enhancements. So good to see that Oracle is thinking about some of these enhancements from a user's perspective. All right.
Yeah, and then another one is a Groovy script. So Oracle developed a Groovy script, which is available in Oracle documentation. And that Groovy script is for post-daily maintenance that can automatically clone your environment, let's say from production to dev or test environment, right after the daily maintenance, which is really great. And you don't have to write the script yourself. It is available on Oracle website. And ready to use, whether you would like to use a batch script on your Windows or just a business rule as a Groovy script, or if you have any Linux servers, that is available as well.
Yeah, so what Fred explained is there is a script already available provided by Oracle. So you just have to download and use it and obviously make some edits based on your configuration and your application details. But it's available for you to download and use. You don't have to write anything from scratch. And if you guys don't know, Oracle has provided a lot of reusable EPM automate scripts too, using PowerShell. There are a lot of scripts that you can reuse.
Yeah, apparently.
We will tag along on this one. So I think that for the past 3-4 months, Oracle has been introducing new application roles.
Yeah.
which kind of segregates your service administrator and other applications and application roles and capabilities within EPM. So for some of the functions that you have in EPM, you don't now need service administrator role. You could provide these application roles to our users and users, and they can perform certain activities. So the latest ones that are coming out in most of the EPM applications are access announcements managed. So obviously you can manage the announcements. Dashboards manage. So you can manage the dashboards, edit. So these are all for custom dashboards. Obviously you can create, edit dashboards, and documents manage. And I believe documents manage is specifically for reports in EPM, like FCC, planning, freeform, PCM, and tax reporting. Obviously, it's not available in EDM, ARCs, and narrative. So I do have Oracle's documentation. I'll probably go through that. Abner, you were going to say something.
I think I used to get a lot of questions like 3-4 years ago, specifically around custom roles, right?
Yeah.
We know ERP has custom roles, and it was I would say a little surprising for customers to know that we didn't have custom rules in EPM in general. Or you cannot customize some roles to provide some specific access to admins. Because the moment you give service administrator access, it's pretty much opening your application to everything. So I think now we're seeing a lot of application roles being introduced in the system, which are now like sort of segregating those access rights, right? I think it's going to be really important from a security perspective now, because at least all your admin activities are going to be really focused on these application rules. You do not need to provide. We'll see that example in EDM as well. Right?
Yeah.
You do not need to provide them service admin access just to take backups and just to trigger some REST APIs, or just to trigger some some other admin activity. So I think this is really going to be a change which is important across the EPM landscape.
Yeah. So here's Oracle's documentation, and I'll just highlight the 3 items that we just talked. Announcements manage. So constructs and manage announcements. Users with this role can add, edit, duplicate, and delete announcements. So earlier it was already included as part of the service administrator role, but now you have this role which you can assign to power users, etc. And the other one was the dashboards manage. This specifically does allow you to add, edit, duplicate, and delete dashboards. And you can also import and export dashboards. And it was already included as part of power user and service administrator role, but now you can assign this to users as well. Documents manage. So this is the other one, construct and manage documents. Now you can add, edit, duplicate, and delete documents, and import and export. So yeah, I think these are all welcome additions. One thing, one thing I hope they add is option for a user or a power user to invoke REST APIs. So now you need a service administrator role for you to invoke REST API. Although there is an option called but you could mimic a user, right? That option is there in Groovy. But I hope they include this in, even if I have to invoke this from, let's say, OIC or another, I don't know, JavaScript or I don't know, Python or whatever. If I have the option to provide my username, even if I'm a power user, I should be able to invoke the REST API. But I think the difficulty is you have to take into your security into consideration. So now, because it's a service administrator, you have access to everything. But when you give access to a power user or a user to invoke the REST API, you also need to enforce security. So if you only have access to, let's say, a couple of entities and 3 departments or whatever, if you were to export a data slice, it should apply that security and provide you that output. And that would be the best case, and I hope Oracle introduces that.
I think it's happening for some, I would say, some tasks like admin tasks, wherein not through REST APIs, but I guess it started to happen through EPM Automate, where you have a role, and if there are only specific, tasks that you can do based on the role, like you can take some backups or something of that sort. As you were talking about roles, like through EPM Automate, it does allow you to trigger those specific tasks.
Nice.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but really, like what you really are referring to here is in terms of the data security,
Yeah, right.
and that sort of will be very important because I know, like from a REST API perspective, that's again something that we struggle with in the sense that we have to give them service admin access. There's no other way. But we'll let's hope this comes out in the future.
I know like some of the users, they use Python and Jupyter notebooks for their visualizations and stuff. So if you're not a service admin, you can't invoke the REST APIs. You cannot visualize the data using Python and Jupyter notebook. So it'll be much more user friendly for Oracle to introduce that. And I know there's like Idea Labs. In Idea Labs, there is an idea who specifically asked for this.
Oh, I see.
So if you guys are listening, you should probably go check out that idea and then work on that idea so that Oracle understands there's a demand for this. All right. So I'll maybe touch on a couple of REST APIs and EPM Automate commands that were added. There's obviously a few REST APIs available in Office to work with user variables. Now, the documentation is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to explain it. But what I'm very excited about is the next two items, which is now you have the option to copy a file from SFTP server directly into EPM and vice versa. So imagine instances, and we were working on a couple of instances where we said, okay, you have to use OIC in between. So OIC is Oracle Integration Cloud. So the files can be placed in an SFTP server. You have to use OIC or a similar integration tool to get that file from the SFTP server and then upload it into EPM. With this update, those kind of activities can be done within EPM itself, right? You could write a Groovy script, which invokes that REST API, copies the file from the SFTP server into EPM, and then you can trigger the data import if that's what you want. And vice versa, right? You could export the data into EPM, and then you could write that file or transfer that file into the SFTP server. So I think this was the most exciting thing out of the August updates for me.
Well, I think we always thought about doing such activities in EPM, right? And the simple reason for that was there are less points of failure. Right? And just from the perspective of end users and system administrators, there's just one less thing to worry about, right? And typically it also comes down to, I think, the division of responsibility, right? Because somebody who owns EPM apps is not the same person who owns OIC. Right. So I think from a really operational perspective, this makes a lot of sense now that we're able to write. In general, we've talked about writing, Groovy scripts and invoking REST APIs, using Groovy scripts, automating a lot of the data management stuff, and using Groovy. So I think this sort of REST API, the more we go towards REST APIs and these things become available in REST APIs, I think it's going to be important and it's going to be useful to actually automate end to end from EPM itself.
Yes,
because that reduces the points of failure as I was talking about.
Right. True. Like you could, so it all comes together now, right? First you have pipeline, and then you can define different stages in pipeline. Right. And now this comes. So this gives a lot of freedom for you to define individual stages. So one stage could be getting the file from the SFTP server into EPM. The next stage could be importing the data. Then you can have an aggregate rule running and all that kind of stuff. Now you can bring all that together into a unified end-to-end process using pipeline. So,
and I guess that should also reduce the time, right, for implementation, because you can avoid that in the
Right.
middle, that
Yeah,
OIC.
exactly. Yeah, otherwise we kind of rely on the technical team or tech team to work with us and including that OIC
Right.
process.
I think that that's going to be a much accelerated sort of an implementation,
Right.
right? Because at the end of the day, usually, as I was saying, the EPM app is owned by different service
Right.
administrators or administrators. And even from an implementation perspective, like we had the tech team would really rely on the EPM team to provide them with all the details,
Right.
because they wouldn't know about REST APIs and EPM and
Oh,
things
I
like
see.
that. So I think from a really operational perspective, as I was saying, this becomes important because now the entire responsibility is on the EPM team itself.
Right. Right.
So we have more control, I would say.
Yeah, we do have more control. Yeah, you're right. Like, even if you work with the tech team, they would usually come to us for the details. Okay, tell me the endpoint, tell me these details, whatever, right?
Right.
Now you don't have to rely on them.
Uh-huh.
You can do all of these activities yourself.
Right. Let's see.
Yeah, less points of failure, more control on EPM to do the end-to-end process. And I think it's even the other way, right? For us to generate a file and place it into an SFTP server,
Right.
which can be consumed by other systems,
Mhm.
is also really good.
Yeah.
I still get frustrated like 3 years ago when I used to talk to Arun. I was like, why do we have to rely on others to do this? We should be able to do this in EPM.
Right.
And that's when I remember like you telling me the first time this REST API calls were done through Groovy.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought like this is something that we need, right? Because more often than not, there is a need to automate the end-to-end process, right from metadata load to data loads to code validations, exporting reports, creating running reports, like end to end. There is always more often than not a need to automate the process, and I feel like the more, again, as I said, the more control we have, the less effort and the less points of failure there are.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now, the sweetest thing that could happen is this being an out-of-the-box job type or whatever you want to call it in pipeline. Like I don't have to write any script. I could just have a job type or whatever you want to call it, component or whatever.
Yeah.
It says copy from SFTP.
Right.
And I should just be able to keep the SFTP server details and file name and all that kind of
Credentials.
stuff.
Yeah.
And just that's it on my Excel.
Yeah.
So that would be the best. So I'm sure like they're thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm
Because
sure.
we're going to talk about something similar on EDM, right?
Yeah.
Because I think pipeline is one thing that's a really a welcome change that's coming in, and I feel like true to its name, pipeline.
Yeah.
There's scope for a lot of automation.
Yes.
Right. Yes. There's a lot of scope for automation now that you can schedule and do a lot of things with pipeline. I feel like in the years to come, or even in the months to come, we'll see a lot of updates coming for pipeline and these sort of jobs. Now that we have SFTP, I'm pretty sure, to start off with, usually Oracle starts with some REST APIs for each of these features. And as you build, earlier on, I think there was more focus on getting EPM automate commands.
Right.
I think now there'll be a shift in focus. I hope there's a shift in focus to having these available within the pipeline itself.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So if you see like even for pipeline, there is a REST API to invoke the pipeline, but there's no EPM automate command to invoke the pipeline.
Right.
So I think there's a shift happening, more towards REST APIs and in fact pipeline. So I know this is something that I don't know if you know Tejas Shetty. He's from the Oracle development team. So I was asking about this feature, like probably when pipeline was introduced back in the day. This is one of the questions I asked him. Hey, you should include this.
Right.
I'm so happy that it's here, so you can see my excitement.
Yeah.
No, and I think this SFTP, really, to be honest, like I've had these questions on a lot of projects.
Yeah.
Like EPM cannot copy to SFTP. I was like, yeah, for now it cannot.
Right.
And we always, as I said, like we relied on YC, to do all of this for us.
Right.
Now it's more like coming into the mix, and I think it's important from the fact that EPM can be implemented as a standalone like product, right? That's really going to be important, or such features are going to be really important, as I said, because more often than not you have to automate, right? And I know EPM Automate was doing a lot of things, but these things will make sure that with EPM Automate, you had to always have a server.
Yes.
That was again
Yes.
a sort of I would say, surprise to everyone, because we kept on saying moving to cloud, and now we have to install something on a machine,
Right.
which was obviously like needed in a lot of cases. But I think with all of this moving to cloud and the fact that we can do it on our applications, it's really a game changer for me.
Right.
Okay, I'll touch on the next couple of items quickly. So there's a couple of new roles in account reconciliation, which is around access control. So you can manage access control and also view access control. These were earlier introduced in other products, but it's coming to account reconciliation now in this release. FCCS consolidation has the ability to now export and import configurable consolidation rule sets and rules. So if you have a configurable consolidation rule or rule set in one of the instances, you can now export it. Import it. So that's, I think, it's a good one. I'm going to let you talk about EPCM upgrades for now, and then we'll touch on EDM. So that's a good segue for us to talk more about EDM.
Right. Yeah, it's a great addition to EPCM with like those features that were available for planning for quite a while, and now they are available for EPCM as well, which is IPM Insights and Task Manager. Two are great tools that gives a lot of benefits. So definitely will worth to explore them with an EPCM application. I think like those features, they were available for quite a while. IPM is quite trendy I think for the last maybe a few months, if not less. So definitely worth to explore those features.
Yeah, I think it's again for EPCM, not for PCMCS.
Right.
So none of these features are coming to the old profitability cost management application. It's coming to EPCM,
which might be depreciated sometime in the future.
I think it's again, knowing where the whole of EPM is going. I think, and I've had the chance to work on EPCM in the recent past, and I feel like it's a really a good change that's happening now that you have forums, now that you can work with the task manager. Like a lot of the activities, as we know, are done like in a month-end cycle, right? And I feel like for coordinating all of that, sometimes you need all these features in a specific tool, right? Like you won't always have FCCS being implemented with PCM. You won't always have planning being implemented with PCM. And so I think, as I was saying, all these products are like standalone in its own sense. So I think such features being enabled, and we always talk about pipeline and ARCs. This is similar, like in the sense that it's one step closer to having EPCM as a full product, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think pipeline in ARCs is it's a hot topic. Hopefully that comes out by end of this year. So looking forward to that. All right, so this is now a good segue into EDM because we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about EDM. So Abhinav, I know there is one feature in August, so you want to maybe cover that?
Yeah. So as we were talking about, like there's a shift on the security itself overall in EPM, and I think that's trickling down to EDM as well now, in the sense that a lot of these service administrator roles and duties are now being sort of segregated in these application rules. So we already had a migrations administrator role, and there's a slight modification to that, I would say, in this in the month of August, in the sense that now you can set using this role, you are able to modify your daily maintenance time. So as I was saying, it's more like you're segregating your duties. Now it's not just one service administrator who's in charge of the entire application. The migrations administrator role allows you some other access rights as well. You can obviously import, export artifacts. You can migrate environments. These were things that were available, but now with more granular level of security, I think with these there might be introduction of more roles as well in the future.
Right.
But I think for now, if you have to change your daily maintenance time, it was only possible to do that with the service admin.
Yeah.
Now this application role allows you to do that.
Right.
So you can really segregate the roles in the sense that you don't need to have you don't need to give access rights to one service administrator for everything, right? You have a lot of segregation of duties when it comes to the admin activities.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So we're going to cover EDM in detail now. And I'm sure we are also planning a session with Kate. So hopefully that happens soon, and I'll have both Kate and Abhinav join that one, so we can talk EDM, only EDM during that session. But Abhinav, tell us more about EDM. What is EDM, and why should you use EDM?
So I would first, whenever I answer such, I get a lot of these questions first of all, because we know there are multiple ways in which you can update your metadata in EPM, right? You can do it manually, you could have integration jobs to do it. Where does EPM actually come into the picture, right? And usually what I do is I just talk about what life is without EPM, right? And it's just based on a lot of experience that I've had across the EPM products like planning, FCCS, even one of the biggest things that Arun and I always discuss about is the chart of account, right? A lot of our activity in EPM is reliant on the chart. And when you come to a situation where you have a very tight month-end close, right? All these small things become really important because there are so many different points of failures that you have to be a little more proactive rather than being reactive. And a good example of that is a lot of times you're running a closed cycle, you're loading your data into FCCS for consolidation, and your metadata is not updated.
Yeah.
So there's a kickout. What do you do with that? Right?
Right.
The job failed. Then you have an integration job and it failed.
Right.
Why did that fail? So now you're getting into a position where you're more reactive. And once there's a bottleneck, when you have a tight close cycle, it becomes really, really critical that you resolve the issues in time. And you need to have a lot of technical capabilities to understand what the issue is and then resolve it. This is where EDM makes your life easier. Because rather than being very reactive, you're being very proactive, right? Any changes that you make go through a series of validations. They go through a series of predefined validations, I would say, for GL, for planning, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, about the enhancements that have happened over the past few months and years. But really, in my mind, that's the biggest advantage I see with EDM, that you are one step ahead in the game. Your updates to metadata, your changes to metadata there's data consistency across your applications. And that's what I say. A lot of people realize that later on when they implement a lot of different products within EPM and even outside of EPM, is that there's one specific dependency across these applications, and that's the chart, right? And the earlier people realize that, the better it is for them, because then they make a very informed decision on why they need EDM. Right? So I think this is what I have seen over the past, like in life without EDM in a landscape where you have a lot of different applications becomes very, very challenging. And more often than not, you would find down the line, EDM would be implemented in those cases.
To the point, like you said, it's like you have to be proactive rather than reactive, right? And you gave it that example of the FCCS. I know in some cases, like you can have different owners, like one for planning, another one for FCC, and then if you are missing some members in FCC, you very likely miss them in planning. So you'll have to then somehow manage all of that, and it can be much more than just duplications, right?
And more often than not, you'll have different stakeholders.
Right. Yeah.
And that's again one of the important things in EDM is that you can get all your stakeholders at one place. You make sure that the process of metadata, which is the core of your application, right?
Right.
You can't do anything without the metadata. The core of your application is synchronized, is aligned across, right? So all your stakeholders being involved. And I think the biggest thing that I see is usually there's lack of governance across the chart of accounts and the updates.
Nice.
Right? And I feel like that's one of the major features or actually the process that EDM brings in, is that in organizations where this is not controlled, where this is not in a defined process, it establishes that governance in place so that you don't face challenges down the line.
So everyone is aware beforehand what is going on. Like, I see.
Yeah, I was going to ask a follow-up question. So let's say, just to touch on the governance and workflow that you just mentioned, you could update your metadata and the hierarchy. So let's say if you're in an Oracle ecosystem, you have Oracle ERP Cloud, you have EPM, let's say you're planning in FCC, for example. If you don't have EDM, you do have the capability to update your hierarchies and values and all that stuff in GL Cloud, right? You could bring that data into EPM, multiple, EPM automate scripts or whatever, and you could bring that into EPM. But can you touch on the governance that you just shared and how that helps in a scenario like this, where if you're just going to use Cloud Geo for all your changes and bringing data into EPM, just maybe elaborate on how the governance.
Yeah, I think to start off with, I would say there's really lack of transparency, first of all, on where the request is actually coming from, right? The first thing that you would notice is when everything is centralized in the GL, there's usually an accounting team or a finance team that's involved in initiating those changes, right? And more often than not, you would see that there are different tools being used to initiate the request itself. So, we have seen the likes of Jira being used, seen the likes of ServiceNow being used to actually initiate that request, right? And there you go, right? When you initiate a request, it's actually in a different tool, right?
Right.
So now you have a request being raised, you have different stakeholders who need to be a part of it, but who do you include? Who do you not include? Well, you know that the change will be made to the GL, and then it's probably going to trickle down to the application, as I said, through integrations.
Yeah.
But do you need those people involved in your request? Maybe not. Maybe you do. But whenever this is outside of the actual application where the change has to be made, there is lack of transparency that I've seen. Right. So whenever you talk about the overall governance, I like to talk about where the request is actually coming from, right? Because there could be like a lot of different stakeholders involved. There could be financial planners, there could be accountants. You never know where the request is coming from. And when you have that centralized at one place where the change has to be made, I think it creates a difference. The second thing that I've seen across is who actually needs to approve that change, right? Because you can have a lot of different stakeholders who need to have a say in any sort of updates that are being made, right? And I think it becomes important that you have a proper approval flow, because number one, it makes sure that your changes, your organization is aligned with those changes.
Yeah.
Every different stakeholder is aware of those changes and they approve those changes. Because at the end of the day, from a business side of things, let's take the example, the biggest example is accounts, right? You can create tons of accounts, but what if people don't use it? Or they're not aligned to using that account? So I think from a governance in terms of the technical benefits, I think there's also a business benefit to it, in the sense that everyone who has to be aware of the change needs to discuss that with the proper stakeholders, and also make sure that they understand how that change will impact them, right? Because more often than not, like if you create an account, if you create an entity, you need to know what's the reason for creating it. And I feel like as you have a governance workflow, you have people who are initiating the request, you have people who are approving the request, and then you have people who are collaborating on the request.
Yeah.
Right? That becomes really important to have a full-blown governance established. And I think more often than not, we always talk about the technical benefits of it, but I've seen it more, being more important from a business side of things as well, right? So I think that's the benefit I see, not just from a technical perspective, but when you talk about the overall process in the organization. I think if you go to a lot of companies or organizations, there's no established process.
Right.
And that becomes a challenge, because you never know who's doing changes, who's to receive those changes, where are the impacts. And I think that is what EDM brings to the table.
Yeah. To give like an example, like I've worked with many public sector clients where they would have like a paper document where they would initiate that request. Okay, I need to create a new account, whether that account is revenue or expense or whatever, the description of that account and all that kind of stuff. That is then passed on to different stakeholders. They approve and it becomes finalized. So all of that can now be centralized and managed within EDM. So you initiate your request, you go through your approval process and everything in EDM. Now, I think one feature that I wanted to highlight is the management hierarchy approvals, which came out probably in June 2024. So maybe you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I think, again, this is, I would say, sort of an addition to a typical approval workflow that we have. In a typical approval workflow, you would have an approval group usually, which is set up, and then you can define different approval policies here. So currently, in EDM, you have series approvals, parallel approvals. You can define number of approvals within an approval group. So all of those things were already existing. I think this is more user-centric in the sense that you can, or I would say management hierarchy-centric in the sense that you can define a user hierarchy, and then the approvals are initiated based on that. So, it's kind of like what I've seen in SEM, right? Because you have POs, you have a management hierarchy, and you have approvals based on that hierarchy. It's something similar here, because you can create a user type application where you define a hierarchy of users, and then based on who is actually initiating the request, the change request in EDM, the approval is actually routed through the hierarchy itself that you've established. Right. So if somebody's reporting to a manager and he initiates a change, it would go through that hierarchy. So it will go to his manager first, and then he'll probably go to his VP and stuff like that. So it's really focused on your hierarchy or your management hierarchy, rather than just a simple group of users that you create, right? It was something that you could have done through sequencing of groups in the approvals, but it was still not as clean. But I think with this, it's much more cleaner. You have a established hierarchy across which the approval would flow.
Sorry, just for my understanding, when we say management hierarchy, is it like alternate hierarchy to the one that we already have, or what is management hierarchy?
So this is basically a hierarchy. So this is not related to any metadata.
Oh,
first
okay.
of all. This is related to users, right? So this is a user hierarchy that you are setting up in the application.
Oh, okay,
Right.
I see.
So it's like if you're reporting to a manager and your manager is reporting to a VP, for example, as I said, then you can create that hierarchy of users in the application and then make sure that the approvals that go through, they go through that same hierarchy. So if I initiate an approval, it goes to my manager for approvals, it goes to his manager for his final approval, right? So it's not actually a metadata, it's related to it.
I see. Got it.
So one other question before we talk about the major EDM updates. Do you need to be in an Oracle ecosystem to use Oracle EDM?
More often than not, yes, you have to, right? Um, because you're some way or the other you're involved in that workflow, right? And this is one of the things that we've seen. More often than not, you don't have a lot of users in EDM because really what happens is your metadata process or your governance process is pretty centralized. You would have a few representatives from different applications, right? Different stakeholder groups. For example, you would have people from accounting, you would have people from FP, right? You would have some service administrators. So usually the EDM, application does not have like hundreds of users, right? That's not what it really is meant to do. But depending upon how many applications you're managing, like if you're managing a lot of different applications, then it's a different use case altogether. But typically, if you think about GL, EPM, you wouldn't have a lot of users in the application. But generally speaking, yes, you need to be a part of the application to perform these activities.
Okay, so that's from a user perspective. Let's say from an application perspective, let's say I don't have Cloud Geo. Let's say I have SAP or Workday or PeopleSoft or whatever. And then I have on the other side EPM. And let's say on the flip side, let's say I have EPM, let's say I have Cloud Geo, but my EPM system is something else, right? Now, in that scenarios, do you think EDM would fit into such landscape?
Absolutely. I think one of the key things that has been happening, and I think this is a good segue to talk about some of the major changes that I feel have happened over the past like 2 years, especially. We always had a universal application type where you can configure an application from scratch. So as you were saying, if you have an SAP application, you can configure an SAP application type and create a template for SAP, right? And obviously use the synchronization features to synchronize that to EPM or EPM or the other way around. But what was not there, I guess, about a couple of years ago was a lot of features around it. For example, extracts, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So extracts have evolved over the past year or so in the sense that you can create a lot of customizations on top of what's already existing, right? So we usually had an export feature before we had extracts, but it was not as I would say sophisticated as it is now. But before we usually relied on exports and imports, which would just export everything that you create. Now you have an option, right? You can create incremental extracts. You can add some columns to it. You can add some constant columns to it. You can add some logic, right? So all of these things have made it much more easier to manage non-Oracle systems because non-Oracle systems, you are basically setting all of your templates up from scratch, and it may require some customizations here and there, right? So with these sort of features coming up, it has become easier to actually have non-Oracle applications in the system. And when you even talk about some other Oracle systems, like for example, HCM, right? There's no direct out of the box connection or out of the box template for HCM, Oracle HCM, which is available right now. But it does with all these features like extracts, as I talked about, it's become easier to set those up and make sure that it's still automated end to end.
Right. Okay.
So sorry, just to follow up on like when you have non-Oracle applications. So we talk about EDM. Are there any competitors that can provide similar products as EDM when you use like mix of non-Oracle and Oracle applications?
So I've seen a few
Mhm.
being used in the past. I've seen the likes of Colibra. I've seen the likes of Informatica also being used. There's some other systems like EVX which are also available. Uh, DRM obviously used to exist and it still continues to exist in a lot of places, which I think 2 years ago there was no comparison. Like being very honest, because it's a part of a cloud product, right?
Right.
You release a product and then cloud cycles are readily more frequent. So now you have monthly updates, right?
Right.
I don't think you had that with on-prem.
Right.
So now the product will evolve a little more, it'll be fast in evolving. So I think there are other products which exist, right? And they've been around for some time, so they are a little more mature in that sense. But I think over the past 2 years, I feel like EDM has really caught up.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of things. When you talk about just Oracle to start off with, I wouldn't recommend anything else but EDM, right?
Yeah.
But if you talk about the fact that there are other applications that are available or that you have to manage, there are maybe other tools which are more seamless because they are more mature. But I think EDM is also getting there. The one big advantage that we haven't talked about is the fact that EDM can also be used with other master data management products. So there'll be cases where you will have EDM to manage the overall Oracle metadata landscape, and then you have other tools which you can use to manage the external applications or non-Oracle applications. So it has been used, or it is readily used in that sort of an architecture as well.
Nice.
But if you just talk about EDM managing as a metadata management tool for the entire organization, I would say it was not so mature a couple of years ago. But with these updates that are happening, I think over the last 2 years, I've seen this grow a lot. And I think it will continue to do that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I think one misconception I think that everyone has is EDM is only generally mostly used for chart of account management. I'm sure that is not the case. It is a master data management tool. It can manage any kind of master data, right? Not just the chart of accounts. That's just a common use case.
Right.
I know, Abhinav, you're currently working on a project where you have products being managed. You have maybe HCM departments being managed, right? So those are all use cases of EDM. It doesn't have to be the chart of account segments that are being managed.
Right.
And now, like EDM, early on, I remember like there were not many sample applications, but now if you enable an EDM sample application, you would see that you can manage customers, suppliers, account reconciliation profiles. You can do a lot of things with EDM. It's just that it's now more easy to do it because of the features that have been released. And I feel like I think that's a general misconception. One of the things that not a lot of people are aware of is EDM can be used to manage your data management mappings too.
Right.
From your legacy applications to if you use SAP as an example, right? And you have a different chart in SAP versus you have a different chart in EPM as an example. You obviously have mappings within your data. And all of that can be managed in EDM and that can be automated. So if you have, let's say you add an account tomorrow, right? You can actually add it to EDM. It'll update your data management mappings and it'll export and update your data management mappings as well. So there is a direct connection now to data management or data exchange to manage your mappings.
Wow, this is very interesting. I mean, I want to clarify, like, earlier when we discussed that you can have a direct integration with your ERP system versus having this EDM as a standalone application. Other technical benefits, like, for planning, for example, you have some member properties that you have to stamp for account dimension, for, other dimensions like department and such. Other benefits of having, integration through EDM versus direct integration with the ERP system?
I think there definitely is, right? Because one of the things that happens with EDM is not just the integration part. Think about all the fields that you have to synchronize in that integration.
Mhm.
With EDM, especially with the out-of-the-box application types that are available for GL, for EPM, FCCS, planning, even PCM, a lot of these fields or all of these fields are actually predefined, right? So as soon as you register an application type, you have all the fields that you need to set up metadata for GL, for planning, for FCCS. You don't need to define them manually. And what happens in that case is there's no chance of any error, right? It's all predefined within the system. And when the integration runs, it makes sure that it exports everything that's needed for the application. So when you synchronize it with, as you were saying, you have specific properties, let's say for account dimension,
Right.
and you have different properties, let's say for other dimensions. That's already taken care of. So
Interesting.
it's as simple as setting up a connection with your with the URL and your credentials. That's it.
So I do recommend watching Abhinav's videos because it is that simple. Like he's saying that it is that simple. Setting up the application type, defining the attributes, and then you're done. So it is an amazing tool. Okay, let's talk about some of the
Absolutely.
major enhancements that you wanted to cover. I know this is not a comprehensive list, but these are the 5 that you picked.
Yeah. So I think the first one that's very close to me is the export and the export dimension and export dimension mapping from pipeline. I think I talked a lot about this with Arun in the past. Like we although there is a direct connection between EDM and GL, EDM and planning. In order to automate this, we always had to use either REST APIs or use EPM automate. Right. This was always as I said, a lot of the end users were shocked that we had to install something on the machine and get it done. But now that this type is available in pipeline, I can actually, for all these out of the box integrations, I can completely orchestrate my data management or metadata export from the pipeline. I can export the dimension to GL. I can export the dimension to planning. I can export the dimension to FCCS. I can do all of that orchestration within the pipeline and schedule it.
Yeah.
Now that the pipeline can be scheduled within the job scheduler, you can actually schedule that. And I've actually covered this in one of my videos end to end, where you can actually schedule it without the use of EPM Automate.
Right. Nice.
So this was a really a welcome change, as I said, for the past couple of years. Like whenever we had to automate it, although we used to say everything is out of the box, we did have to create an EPM Automate script to automate this. So now this is possible within the pipeline itself.
Yeah.
Nice. So you can invoke that pipeline from EDM and just put it on schedule to run every.
Yeah. You don't need to actually invoke it from EDM. You create the pipeline and you schedule it to run within planning, for example.
Okay.
And it will just initiate a tool.
See,
right?
It'll pull it from
You pull it from EDM.
Oh, okay. So you don't have pipeline EDM, right?
No. So EDM
Oh,
ARCs don't have pipeline yet.
see.
But yeah.
I was telling Arun it would be a welcome change.
It would be, yeah, because like from EDM you can
Yeah.
just distribute it to everywhere. Like you
Right.
don't have to.
Right. And that's what I've actually tried to do in my video, where you use the pipeline, although it is in planning. I know it probably will not, like from a technical perspective, I think you can use the pipeline as a separate, I would say, tool.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Right? And you can actually push all those updates to GL, to
Right,
planning,
right.
to FCCS from just one pipeline.
One pipeline.
So that's a welcome change.
Yeah. So as long as you set up connections in EPM to all of the different applications,
Yeah.
Right.
you now have the ability to have one pipeline in planning in both the EDM job and
Right.
yeah, synchronize data across different applications. Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Kudos to Oracle. I mean, pipeline, Groovy, and all these enhancements into EDM are like,
Yeah.
flow mining.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, some of these things we've complained about in the past, like, oh, this is just too hard to do.
Yeah.
What do we need to have a script? Why do I need to do this offline or use a different tool?
Right.
Now all of that is coming together in EPM. So
and not only that, like I feel around in the past 2 years, there have been use cases which I was like, oh, I can't do this again.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about one of those. Like I was like, oh, we can't do this in EDM, or there's no clean way of doing this in EDM. Now there is.
Right.
So I think just talking about this calculated name for nodes and viewpoints, right? I think the name property in EDM is the most important, because that's really what translates into your member name and member name in EPM as an example, right? That's one of the most important things. And for the past couple of years, I've had use cases where the ask was to calculate the name property based on some logic, some business logic.
Right.
So let's say, and you gave a right example, or you have something in SAP, let's say an attribute in SAP, in the SAP ERP, and you need to use that attribute to calculate the member name for EPM. So your member name would be some sort of ID, which you will get from an attribute in SAP. Right. And it's not a straightforward copy of the attribute. You have to do some sort of logic or expression build or calculation.
Right.
And that was not possible with EDM before. Now with this calculated name, you can. So you can say, okay, I have an attribute in SAP. I can take that. I can modify that. I can add some prefixes. I can add some logic to it. I can add a counter to it and say, okay, this is my member 1, member 2, member 3. I can do all the sorts of calculation that I need to actually calculate the name of the node. So it was available for you had the capability to do it for other properties, not for names, but now you can.
Interesting.
Right.
A very good example of what one use case which I've seen across.
All right. We talked about management.
Talked about that.
Okay. The other one. Next one is
again important. I would say, just in general, the extract feature is very, very important, because for any application which is not out of the box, right, it's not always possible to use the export option. With exports, usually you will export everything, all the properties, everything that you've created, right? But with extracts, what it allows you to do is to modify your export, sort of, right? There may be some columns that you don't want to export. There may be some columns that you want to add some logic. There may be some constant columns or columns with constant values that you have to export, and that does not work with usually with the exports. So with I've seen this a lot with the universal applications or not applications which are not out of the box, is that you definitely need something like extracts to make sure that you can actually generate what is needed by that application, right? Sometimes within Oracle, it's a little easier because you have those fields available, but with something like SAP or other systems that are available, they may not use the same type of file format that you have for exports. So sometimes they use different delimiters, sometimes they use constant columns. So it becomes this extract feature in general is very important from an EDM perspective. And what they've introduced in March is essentially the capability to compare specific properties within your application and decide whether that property should be included in the extract or decide whether it should not be included in the extract. Because the feature within there's a feature within extracts which is called as incremental extract, and that is useful because every time you don't want to extract everything, right? You don't want to extract the entire hierarchy and send it every time. With incremental extracts, obviously you are able to decide what was extracted the last time in the last one, and then what changes have happened over that period of time, and only synchronize those incremental changes. Right, this makes your process faster, right, of course, and because you're not synchronizing everything every time. But now you have more logic that you can write. or that you can enable within the application based on specific properties. So again, a very, very welcome change.
So let me ask you this. I know you're very excited about when we talked about departments in HCM. Is this something that is useful in that scenario?
Absolutely, because more often than not, you will see that, and this was something that was not there before. You have a feature called as extract packages.
Yeah.
And what extract packages would do is it would allow you to combine multiple files or extracts into one package, into one zip file. And it doesn't only provide you the capability to combine two files in a zip file, but you can even combine two files together.
Right.
So if you have file 1, file 2, you can merge the contents of those two files into one if you need to. So this is very, very powerful in the sense that you never know what the end application needs, right? So for HCM, maybe it needs you to combine two files. For other application, maybe you need just to generate these in a zip file, right? We have the concept of value sets and hierarchy sets in the GL as an example, where you need two files, right? You need one for value sets, one for hierarchy sets, and these are combined into zip files. So in general, I think the extract packages and extracts, as I was telling you, it's really, really important when you don't have a out-of-the-box integration, right? Because you never know what you need from the application perspective, the end application, target application perspective. So again, something that I've seen being used across. HCM is a good example because we don't have an HCM integration right now. But that's just for HCM and departments. You would see there have been cases when I've used it for some existing non-Oracle applications where they required a different delimiter. They did not use comma unlimited, they used pipe delimited, or they used to combine multiple files into one. So I have seen those cases being used. Before extract packages, you would do all this transformation in OIC, right? Or a relevant ETL tool, right? You would do all these sort of transformations there. But now with EDM, I think this is one of the advantages of having an MDM tool, because you can actually do a lot of these extracts and transformations within the tool. Again, it gives you more control. It reduces points of failures, because the only thing the ETL tool would now do is extract that information and send it to the target application, right? So it reduces your checkpoints and failure points within the end-to-end flow.
If I can ask, Abhinav, so that when you give the example when you combine two files, can you give any particular example? I'm just trying to think what
so
could be
maybe
the case.
before you answer that. So most of the EPM folks that we know, like metadata update, if we were to do the metadata update, it's just one file.
Right. Yes.
There's one file we upload, it has all the properties.
Yes.
But a specific example of HCM maybe is like they have a tool called HCM Data Loader. Now, when you use HCM Data Loader, and let's say if you're setting up departments, it expects 3 different files or combined 3 different type of data.
It expects you to have 3 different header sections. So within the same file, you have a series of columns on the first row. You have the data for it, and then you have a series of columns for another section. You have data for that. So basically, you can think about these as 3 different files with 3 different types of headers being combined into one.
So that's one example. The other example Abhinav gave is about the GL hierarchies, right? So let's say you first in GL, if you were to do this in GL,
right,
you would first define the value sets. So the values,
right? Yes,
all the values, and then you define the hierarchy.
Right.
So it's 2 different files now on the GL side, right? But on our side, when we define, let's say, our GL account,
right,
and the values and the hierarchy, if you have to push that into GL, you need two files. One is the values, and then the hierarchy.
So when you say values, what do you mean, like member names?
All the members.
So it's 2 different concepts in the GL, right? You have a list of values. It's a list of values,
right?
And then you organize these list of values into a hierarchy. right? So that's why in GL, you have two different concepts. One is the value set, and the hierarchy is based on the value set. Right.
So the example is, you have service revenue, product revenue.
Exactly.
All of these are values,
Right.
different accounts
Uh-huh.
with respective properties and descriptions and everything.
Uh-huh.
That gets defined first in GL.
Uh-huh.
These are all the values or members in
Right. Yeah.
all the values and
Yes.
description, start date, end date, whatnot.
Right.
The type of account and all that gets defined first.
Mhm.
Then when you define the hierarchy, you're just using those values in specific roles, right?
I
So
see.
you need to first define the values and then define the hierarchy.
See. Like
So
this is
when-
a parent of this
Right,
member.
exactly. So
Right.
that's where when we use EDM,
Mhm.
we're going to define it once in EDM, right? But when you export it to GL, you need two files, one for defining the values
I
and the
see.
value sets,
Yeah.
and then one to define the hierarchy.
The hierarchy or
Got it.
relationship.
Interesting.
So that's two separate files.
Right.
But I'm so excited about HCM because now you can combine
Right.
three different extracts or multiple extracts
Yeah.
in one file.
That makes sense. I see.
Yeah. So HCM data loader, I don't know if many of us don't know HCM data loader,
Right.
but I've seen because I used to work on ERP and HCM conversion, so I've seen that files.
Right. I see.
So like he said, you have it's like three different types of definitions.
Mhm.
So first you define something which has its own set of columns,
Right.
and then the data, then another set of definition columns, header columns, then the data, then another set of definition columns.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the important thing is it's pipe delimited.
I
Right,
see.
so-
Yeah. You can change the delimiter to whatever you need.
I
So
see.
again, I know it's a little strange, but you do encounter such things. I was like, when I saw this, I was like, how am I doing this? And thankfully, like we have all these features now.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
All right, good segue into the next
the
one.
last one is like really important. I think in my mind, there's still a lot more to be done here in the sequence properties. So there are a lot of use cases where the EDM system is expected to generate IDs.
Mhm.
And when I say IDs, it's let's say you're creating a member name or you're storing, let's say, I would say some information related to suppliers or you're storing some sort of other information where you need to generate IDs from EDM. Before this, it was, I think, not possible to do that automatically. What I would typically do is I would give some sort of field to the end user to type in an ID, right? That would be the way. Or I would generate something using some sort of formula, but it was not there was no way in which I could generate a counter or have something like that which counts the number of nodes and generates the ID based on that. There's no way I could do that. With sequence property, that becomes a reality now.
Right.
So you have a property
Mhm.
which is applicable for the entire I would say, the node and node type rather. And what it does is, let's say you have an account and you want to give you want to have an ID for that account, right? And you want to say, okay, account 1, right? You can now use this sequence property. It will start with 1. You can have a prefix for it and say, okay, my prefix is account and my counter is 1 for the first node that I create. As soon as you create the second node, it will automatically generate the ID for the second node as account 2,
Mhm.
right? So it can go on generating that with the sequence. You can go on generating that with the sequence property. Earlier on, there was no way in which you can modify things about the sequence property. Once it's set up, it starts counting.
Yeah.
Now, there's a major, or I would say there was a flaw with this. I would say, in my mind, that's a flaw. The flaw is that that in EDM everything works through change requests.
Right.
Whenever you have to make a change, add an account, remove an account, whatever, you have to add it through a change request. Every time you create a change request for this particular node, let's say account, it would automatically increment the counter for this sequence by 1, and it will generate an ID. So if I go ahead and create a change request, you go ahead create a change request, and Fred, you go ahead and create a change request. There are 3 change requests that are created at the same time, and the counter has been incremented by 1 each time. If I don't submit the change request and you two do, your IDs get created, my ID doesn't. Right? So there's a break in the sequence, right? ID, let's say account 1 and 2 have been created. I created 3, you created 4, you created 5.
Nice.
3 doesn't get created, but 4 and 5 do. Because my change has not been submitted.
Yeah. That's confusing.
So the counter goes on incrementing every time a change request is created. But now with this update, what you can do, or what an application owner can do, is go ahead and reset the counter. Right. So if, let's say, there are 10 users, all of them have created like 10 change requests. Let's say none of them have been submitted, but the counter has now incremented to 10. Right. So somebody can go in and reset that counter. Right. So I think in general, sequence property is a very important feature that's going to be used a lot, especially for some specific use cases where you have the case with HCM, you have those cases with non-Oracle applications as well, where you need to generate an ID.
Right. Yes.
And usually that ID is in a specific format, right? You can have an ID with some name, with some ID, and then a counter. So it's usually in some sort of format, like I said, account 1, account 2, account 3, like that. And we always had the capability to generate a format, but there was no counter that can automatically increment and create a unique ID for you, right? But with this, I think that sort of feature has become available in EDM, and I think I'm going to use it a lot for sure, because I know that there are specific use cases where this has to be used.
Yeah, I think just for everyone's knowledge, right? So for us, there's no ID when we go and look at the metadata. There's no ID field.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Yeah.
So, but look at other systems. For example, it seems a very good example. They need to have like a source system reference.
Right. Yeah.
That source system reference is actually the ID that we can create in EDM. Right. So how it helps is, let's say we change something.
Right.
So let's say a department was called as marketing.
Right.
And then later on, EDM, we changed that to
digital
marketing.
Yeah.
Right. So when we extract and update that, it is easy for this HCM system to know by the source system reference field, hey, I need to go and update this field or that record.
That's basically your unique ID.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I wanted to clarify. I think this one of the common situations, at least that I've seen, like in EPM, you don't have that internal ID.
Yes.
So let's say you updated your chart of account member names, and so if you just export and then re-import, as far as I know, it will just purge all your data against that member because that member doesn't exist anymore, right? You have a new member name. With EDM, can you replace member name but keep all data against that new member?
So, well, first of all, when we don't typically recommend deleting it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the first thing.
Right.
Because there is historical data against it. So you have to be really careful when you want to delete it.
Right.
Right. The next thing is, yes, when you say there is EDM only manages your metadata, right? So yes, you can change names, you can change the member name, and when you export that, it will make sure that the member name is updated.
Right.
It doesn't delete and create your members. Right. So when I think in planning or in FCCL, there is an ID that the application really stores, right?
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, there's a UID that it stores within the application.
But you don't see it.
You don't see it.
I see. Okay.
But when you change something, it changes that the existing node. It doesn't delete and create anything.
Yeah.
Because if it deletes, then it deletes all your data.
Right.
Right. So if you change a member name
Mhm,
within EDM,
mhm.
it will change the corresponding member name in the application itself. It doesn't create a new member for it.
Now it has its own impact.
Yeah,
Let's say you use that member name in the business role.
Right.
That's not going to work.
that's not gonna work.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right?
But that's
You use-
technical.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
in reports, it's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
So forms, obviously, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But your data will be there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because like I know, at least in my case, is what I did. When you don't have ATM, you export, and then when you import, it will purge all data. But if you just rename manually member name, then it will keep your data.
Yeah, so
Yes,
keep it-
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because behind the scenes, there's an ID,
I see.
right? So EDM maintains that ID, I believe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we use a file,
Right.
there's no reference to that ID. in the
Yes.
Yeah.
file. Yeah. So,
I see. Yeah, that's
Right.
really cool.
one more question for the sequence. Does it always start from one? Do we have the option to say, oh, the sequence should start from 10,000?
You can set that.
Okay.
You can set that from 10,000. But again, I think with sequence, I feel it's important that a sequence will always be used in an expression more often than not, because what a sequence is just a counter, right? You will not always have an ID which is just a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So the way I typically see sequence being used is in conjunction with some sort of prefix, some sort of predefined format of the ID, right? You could have like department one, you could have account one, or it's a very good example, but it will always be used in conjunction with some alphanumeric text, right? So I think with the counter, yes, you can set it to start at any number.
But any
Maybe
start-
like you have 20 IDs that are already created, so you want to start with 21.
Right.
You can obviously do that.
Okay.
And sorry, regarding sequence, just for my understanding, if you you didn't have this feature before March, right, 2024. Let's say you already have so many, not consistent IDs. There is no way you can, replace them to make it.
So yes, there is no automated way. There was no automated way to generate something, right? But we used to enforce a lot of rules through validations even back then, right? So if you, first of all, you need to enforce certain rules to keep any sort of consistency, as you're saying. If you want the ID to be in a particular format,
Right.
let's say, right? Let's say it should start with account.
Right.
It can have a counter at the end, but it should start with account underscore. I can enforce that through validations. I can say, okay, my member name should always, or a member ID should always start with account underscore. So I can enforce that, although this is still something that the user may input, right? But I can still enforce that.
I see.
Right? I can enforce, I can start it with a default text to say, okay, start with account underscore. That is pre-populated. The user just goes in and enters a counter. 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, 100. The user can go ahead and enter that. If he edits the field in a format which is not acceptable by system, I can enforce a validation rule on that. So there were workarounds to it.
Right.
It was not as automated as it could be.
Right.
Now it is with sequencing,
I see.
but we used to enforce that through validation.
Got it.
Awesome. Amazing. So to conclude EDM, I have some key takeaways or things that people should understand from EDM. One is you can have a governance and approval workflow in place in EDM. So there is a process that you can define in EDM. The second thing is, yes, if it is an Oracle ecosystem, it kind of makes sense to have EDM because you have out-of-the-box connectors and you have flexibility in terms of extracts and stuff like that. Third, you don't need to be in an Oracle ecosystem to implement EDM, right? It is a master data management tool. Although it works seamlessly with Oracle products because you have out-of-the-box connectors and stuff, you could still use it with other applications.
Right.
So those are some of my key takeaways. And from what I've been saying, there's been a lot of enhancements for the last 2 years. So we're seeing new features coming out, which is making all of this process more efficient and seamless.
I think to me, I would just call out one thing. I think it's made the tool is much more business friendly.
Right.
Right. A lot of these changes are initiated by the business. I know at the end of the day, there's a technical admin or a team that does these updates. But with EDM, I think that is something that I've seen a lot is business is the major stakeholder, right? And they are now involved in the process and they are not now involved. They don't need to know the technicalities behind. There are things that we've enforced. They need to adhere to that. But at the end of the day, the business is involved in the process and they are more hands-on. They know what's happening in the group without worrying about the technical details. So I think that's the biggest change I see.
Yeah. Good to know. I know in the next session with Kate and yourself, what we can do is talk a little bit more about the workload limits. I know there's 5,000 workloads and stuff like that, so we'll cover that in the next session. So thanks, Avinath, for all the EDM insights.
Yeah, thank you.
That was we learned a lot.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So next, we just wanted to cover some of the upcoming events for EPM. You want to take this one?
Yes, sure. So between August 19 and 23, Auto, which is probably the most famous user group, Oracle user group, they will be having so many sessions every day.
We have 15 sessions altogether.
Yeah. I know, Arun, you are one of the speakers and presenters. So we'll be definitely looking into those sessions and encourage everyone to register and join. It's very I would say valuable and informative. You definitely get a lot of value from that.
Yeah.
So worth to register.
Yeah, I think if you're an OITAG member, all these sessions are free for you. It makes sense for you to attend these sessions because there are some really good customer use cases that are being presented, and obviously some really good speakers, like some really good sessions. We have, I think on 19, we kind of present what's coming. But other than that, we have 14 different sessions where we talk about different products in EPM, covering planning, FCC, reconciliation, narrative. So almost all the products are being covered.
Nice, yeah. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. All right, so next one, Cloud World is coming up. So 9 to 12 in Las Vegas. I'll put the link here, but it's pretty straightforward, oracle.com/cloudworld. You can go and register if you're not. I think some of the sessions are available online. You could register and you can attend some of the sessions online. But this is another premier Oracle event. So yeah, if you're interested, you could register and also register online to see the sessions.
So Arun, I have a question. Maybe it was to clarify those Oracle Cloud World events. Who's the target audience? Who's it for? Is it for technical consultant? For who?
So interesting question. It's for both. So you have a lot of sessions. So I don't know if you know, but Oracle kind of changed the eligibility of attending Cloud World because now you have to have a customer with you to present at this Cloud World. So let's say if you're an EPM system implementer and you have a pretty good use case that you want to present. Earlier, you could just submit that abstract and they would evaluate and say, okay, this is good, you can come present, right?
Right.
Now you need to have a customer with you. So that kind of tells me that this is more oriented towards, hey, I'm going to show you some of the use cases from a user's perspective, that these are the things that we have done.
Right.
And so other users and other firms and organizations know what kind of things you can do with Oracle Cloud applications. But there are learning opportunities, right? So as a consultant, as an SI, system implementer, you could attend certain learning sessions.
I see.
And I also believe they have few certifications available for you to take. And it's available for like 3 or 4 months where you can complete those certifications. I'm not too clear on that, but there are learning opportunities, classroom sessions, live labs, happening. So a lot of learning opportunities. So it's targeted for both technical, functional, end
Customers,
users. Yeah, and also it's a good way for you to know what's coming.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For everyone. Like,
Yeah.
so what's Oracle thinking in terms of what's coming in the next quarter or what's coming in the next year or so?
Yeah. Yeah.
So and also it's not just EPM, right?
Right. Right.
So you get to know what's the general, I guess, the path
Right.
that Oracle is thinking in terms of cloud. And obviously with all generative AI and kind of stuff, you also get to know from an AI and Gen AI perspective, what are the things that are coming into EPM or ERP or all of the other Oracle applications. I know operational planning is one thing that I'm excited about. I'm going to keep my mouth quiet until it comes. I'm just not going to talk about it. But operational planning is something that we both have talked a lot about because there are times when we know there's a need for having a relational database in the mix.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that Oracle's can help with. So again, these kind of the things you would know if you attend these kind of sessions and webinars and conferences. So
yeah. Sounds great. I know you are going.
I am.
So we'll be waiting for updates from you then.
Probably I'll do some sessions from there.
Yeah, that would be great.
Your Instagram videos. All right. So okay, so EPM user group event for Toronto. So we are planning one. We are also looking at where we can host this session. So October or November 2024, we'll have a session, and we'll reach out to folks, probably put it in LinkedIn and request for abstracts to be submitted.
Right.
I think this time around, I want people to submit their abstracts and come present at our user group event. So if you have questions, you can reach out to myself, Fred, Harsh, Asmat, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add before we conclude?
No, I think it was very, huge pleasure. I mean, I have to learn a lot about EDM. So my mind, there's just so many information and it seemed to be really, real cool application that definitely worth to install and explore.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we look forward to more sessions with you, Abhinav. So this was really helpful. And for the user group event, I'm hoping we can do an EDM session. I know PCM is another thing I want to talk to you about. So maybe we'll have another session. So Harsh has also done a lot of PCM stuff. So maybe we'll include Harsh and you in the PCM conversation. All right, so we look forward to having Kate in one of the upcoming sessions. I've been asking you for a time, so hopefully that happens in before Outlook.
Yeah.
And then everyone's going to get busy afterwards. All right, thanks everyone. If you want the slides, you can reach out to us, and probably we'll have a way to include the slide or provide to you. But yeah. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the next episode.
Yeah,
take care.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.